Welcome back. Last century actually saw a lot of political, constitutional, historical development, due to which we were able to get finally independence in the year 1947. Each year actually marks a different level of development in the historical event, incident, agitation. It also added a new chapters, such as many occasions that actually took place in the last millennium or century, something like cooperative movement, civil disobedience movement, later on the next decade. Then in the next upcoming decade, we saw Quit India movement. Similarly, when in 1912, Bihar state actually got formed, divided from West Bengal, or you can say that Bengal. There was no concept of West Bengal. The tribal leaders and the tribal people of the same region, the southern region of Bihar, actually demanded a state for themselves, which actually got more agitated and evident from the formation of another tribal state in their neighborhood in 1936 in the form of Odisha. Third decade of the last century actually marked the incremental development in the agitation, resentment, and asked for separate statehood for the tribes and the people of southern Bihar. That contemporary is known as Jharkhand. Similarly, we also see a tremendous development in the third decade of the last century with the failure of Chelmsford Montague 1919 reforms and the arrival of Simon Commission in 1927 that submitted its response in 1930. This decade actually is marked from the submission of the report, then Nehru report of the 1928. These were the subsequent evidence. I am not looking out for the particularities, but it actually it should be looked in the series of the subsequent events that actually was happening during the spell of time. Moreover, with the reactivation of Mahatma Gandhi from 1928, that is, you can say that after the blunder or fiasco of Chauri Chaurak incident and the call of the prior called event of non-cooperation movement by him, we saw his political inactivity during a continuation of 6, 7 or 8 period, something like that. But when he again reactivated, another movement actually was launched in 1930 that actually lasted till like 1934, something like that. It can actually associated with the phased manner of the development of the period, like when the salt tax was broken with 78 others supporters. It actually aimed at the paralysis of the government. That was actually contrary from the earlier movement of Mahatma Gandhi, non-cooperation movement, where actually the non-cooperation towards the government was extended in the forms of like not acting like a government. But here it was actually like creating a chaotic situation for the government, to disabling it. We are not opposing it, but we are not supporting it. Helplessness, a kind of situation you can talk about. The nature actually become very different. The approach become very different. But what happens after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact? Though this event was still in continuation, but its nature got changed during this decade only. We also see the development of Round Table Conference that actually aims to, for the government, for the British government, to actually get these people and this princely estate to what kind of nature, the nature of to what kind of government they are going to form via the Government of India Act 1935. We also see the dissolution of diarchy at the provinces. We also see building of narratives during this period. From Allama Iqbal's Muslim Mediterranean country in 1930 only. Now he was the same person who in 1905 wrote the song Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustata Hamara. But what happened to the psyche and the developmental of the people? Other Mediterranean community of the country who were actually demanding a separate statehood for themselves. It was just in between this second and in between third round table conference that a scholar, a British scholar, Rahmat Ali, started to circulate the pamphlets regarding a country that actually he called itself Pakistan. Two-nation theory basically was proposed by him. Sorry for the disturbance. And then finally we also see the provincial elections that actually were held in 1937. It was actually also somewhere like in between the Second World War. So we are going to see a lot of development, constitutional development, political development, development on the basis of community, development on the basis of psychology, separatism, bifurcation, the separation of Myanmar from India, the division of Bihar from Bengal, and then later on the division of Bihar to form a separate state called Odisha. In between all this cause, how these people of South Bihar, currently in what is known as Jharkhand, established their theory, what were the factors that was actually evident, prominent during this period, and how this all the passing of these years in this decade, that is from 1930 to 1940, shaped the history and the discourse of the country in the national politics as well as Jharkhand politics or South Bihar politics of the current time. We are going to have a look over this period of time. Myself, Achal Priyadarshy, currently I am working as academic associate for the AIS, New Delhi. I'm very grateful to you that for your thunderous response for my books, that is Travelpedia on the Jharkhand of tribes of Jharkhand, and on Jharkhand Plus, general knowledge book on Jharkhand. I am also grateful for your response on social media. For this purpose, I made inauguration moment. I met first and foremost Chief Minister of Jharkhand, Shri Babulal Marandi ji, former Deputy CM Shri Sudesh Mahato ji, and current Cabinet Minister from the Hemant Soren government, Shri Satyanarayana Bhokta ji. Thank you so much again. So let's continue our class of today. First of all, we are going to have a look over the political and constitutional development during this period. In my initial briefing, I have already told you about the kind of development that actually took place because of the failure of reforms of 1919 that actually emerges because of the Jallianwala massacre that actually emerges with the arrival of Simon Commission, with the formation of and the submission of Nehru's report of 1928. Motilal Nehru. Failure of 1919 reforms, Swaraj Party's extensive role. The party actually came into the existence with the incidents of the Chora Chori and the call of the non-cooperation movement. Later, submission of Nehru report and ask for the dominion status. That actually sets the highlight of the beginning of 1900, third decade of the 20th century. But its prominence gains with the development of the passing of the years, like in the form of reactivation of Mahatma Gandhi again in 1928. Now, after the fiasco of Chauri Chora, he kept himself something like into asylum. He restricted himself. But since 1928, he aroused all kind of energy around him. Why? To break SALT law along with his 78 supporters by Dandi March starting. This phase could also be seen, this means movement can also be seen in phases, like from its beginning to the conclusion of Gandhi-Irwin Pact, and then till the lump sum end of this movement till 1934, when it actually became leaderless on of its own. So Gandhiji reactivated himself, that actually aims at paralyzing the government. The very nature of this movement was very different to what he actually had earlier in the 20th century, the non-cooperative movement. Here it wasn't like that people or the leaders are not going to cooperate to the government. They created kind of a situation, a chaotic situation, that actually aims at disrupting the government, paralyzing the government. Taxes were not going to be paid. How the government is going to be function? Administrative machinery is coming to be the, you can say that in a condition, in a situation where without the support of the normal mass people, it is not going to function efficiently as the way it functioned earlier, right? So the nature of this movement was very different. But it should be also understood that what happened to this movement when in between the second and third round table conference that actually was happened in UK. Gandhi-Irwin Pact actually got into the, it took shape. So later on in 1933, again Gandhiji accepted the failure of this movement, civil disobedience movement. Gandhiji in past historically had accepted the failure of the non-cooperative movement with the fiasco of Chauri Chora, and again he claimed its failure. It is also noticeable that with the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, if you ignore this Quit India movement, none of the movement was so much organized by him then in the entire 15 to coming 17 years till we got independence. It also shows the nature of agitation and struggle of the leaders of the Congress, of the people against the British rule, the British Raj. What also became a distinctive feature of this decade was the round table conference that was actually uh, called by the British rule for the setup of the kind of the nature of upcoming governance, what they call like responsible governance, with the introduction of Government of India at 1935. So they wanted to have a kind of mitigation, a kind of understanding, a reconciliation in between the leaders and the princely states, because of which 3 phases of round table conference had happened. It was named round because there was no leader of this conference. Everybody had a same equity. Every leader from every party, like Muslim League, Congress, Indian National Congress, All India Muslim League, or either the princely states, had the same kind of equity. They were set facing each other directly. So it was called Round Table Conference. Important outcome of this conference was All India Federation under new government, obviously. And second was that only the second conference was attended by Mahatma Gandhi. After that, he was again detained. However, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar actually attended all the 3 phases of the sessions of this government. So Gandhi attended the second round table conference that actually happened from September to December 1931, and the final session of this conference actually had happened like from November to December of the next year, like 1932. So the highlight of this decade after the subsequent event of round table conference was Government of India Act of 1935. That actually not only establishes a central institution, financial institution in the form of RBI or Imperial Bank, RBI, Imperial, sorry, it was the State Bank's earlier name, Imperial Bank, RBI, a central judiciary institute in the form of Supreme Court. But it also called for the removal of hierarchy from the provinces. Establishment of responsible government was the basic essence of this act. Responsible government with safeguards. Federal executive against hierarchy. As I already mentioned, hierarchy was removed from the provinces, but actually positioned in the center. Then provincial autonomy was given, obviously, because of the removal of this. Then in 6 provinces, bicameral legislature was set up. 6 provinces were United Province, that is current UP, Bengal, Bihar, Assam, Madras, and Bombay. You must be knowing that till this time there were like 11 provinces, out of which 6 had bicameral legislatures. But in the context of Jharkhand movement or South Bihar responses towards the Raj or towards the Congress, it is worth to be considered that administration of tribal areas was reserved to the hands of Governor Generals. So whoever became the Governor General actually has the first hand control over the tribal areas, either you call it Garhwal or Chota Nagpur or Northeast India, right? Current Northeast India actually bordered with the Burma. Also, the first time there was provincial elections that actually got happened in 1937. It also took in Bihar. And since in the cabinet there was no leader tribal or non-tribal, from South Bihar, that is Jharkhand. A kind of resentment, agitation, anger, frustration evoked them. You can see this with the formation of Adivasi Mahasabha in 1938. That as much as 5 organizations amalgamated themselves to form a huge elephantine organization, so that constitutionally, politically, they can defend their interest. In 1938, just next year. We will see it later. So these were the important political and constitutional development during this period. Now let's have a take on the subaltern development during this period at the national level, if not particularly in South Bihar level. What I mean to say that first of all, we should set up the class on the basis of national event that actually took during this decade nationally, that actually has a national interest or influence, because on which we will be able to derive what, when, whatever thing actually happened in South Bihar. Subaltern actually indicates the lower strata, like agrarian people, like scheduled people, scheduled tribe, scheduled caste. Sometimes it also represents women, so and so. So subaltern development becomes necessary. Why? Because the tribals actually comes under this. This decade also marks the rise and shine moment for Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. His famous Pune Pact in 1932 in September in Yervada, Pune, with Mahatma Gandhi. This decade also marks honorarily to call this depressed class to be as arisen by Mahatma Gandhi. This decade also marks the communal award and a depressed award by Ramsay MacDonald in 1932 August. So this decade becomes very much important. As I said earlier, that every decade has its relevance. But with the incoming of this decade, the agitation level, the resentment level, not among only the depressed class, not only among the Muslim leaders, in the Hindu leaders, in the Congress persons, in the form of Subhash Chandra Bose, after the Tripuri session of the Congress, everything happened during this decade only. And it also becomes in the developmental of formation of separatist movement from Bihar, of Jharkhand, to understand what were the factors that actually gave momentum to this agitation for the formation of the state. So the conclusive highlight of this topic can be like, against excessive land revenue, jamindars and economic exploitations. As I already mentioned, that agrarian or peasant community hold the center stage when you study about the subaltern. The land revenue was excessive. The tax rate were exorbitant. Exploitation was there. Jamindars were there. So what happened? That here and there, everywhere you can see that there was formation of Kisan Sabhas. At national level, it was only delayed, or you can say that it was procrastinated. In 1936 in Lucknow, it got formed. But in Bihar, it was formed as soon as 1929 by Sahajanand Saraswati ji, and within the next year only, in Jharkhand, it was formed by Theble Oraon, a Oraon community leader, along with Paul Dayal. Theble Oraon was born in something like 1860s of the 19th century. Theble Oraon holds the distinction to bring what is today called in Ranchi RIMS or BIT Mishra, and almost a dozen of institutions actually are here because of the efforts made by him. He was the person who initially gave the shape of Adivasi Mahasabha, and after the formation of actual Adivasi Mahasabha in 1938, in the very next year he formed another Adivasi Mahasabha that was also asked by JPSC last year. That was called Sanatan Adivasi Mahasabha. Today, no one knows about him. Why? Why is he able to see his fate? Similar to Kartik Oraon, Theble Oraon, Kartik Oraon. Why are you forgetting these heroes? So we see Bihar Kisan Sabha by Sahajanand Saraswati. It was established in 1929 at Sonpur Mela, that actually happens in Vaishali. In the very next year, there is a contradiction of factual figure of this, but in the very next year, Chota Nagpur Kisan Sabha was formed by Theble Oraon and Paul Dayal, and very later on, after something like more year than after this, All India Kisan Sabha was formed in Lucknow in 1936. As already I mentioned, communal award by Ramsay MacDonald in 1932 on 16th of August, it was introduced in the country, and Pune Pact between Gandhi and Ambedkar in 1932 again in the very next month, that is 24th of September, took place. So these were the subaltern response or development in the third decade of the past century. Now let's see the another prominent feature of this period. It's in the form of building of narratives, building of state, building of nationhood, building of region, building of government, and artificial building of two communities. Today we know that with the outbreak of Russia-Ukraine war, there is a fifth generation of warfare called propaganda war. Propaganda actually is not a new thing. It is there in history, and that is only why it is said that history repeats itself. So we saw development of propaganda. In 1905, Allama Iqbal wrote, "Sare jahan se अच्छा Hindustan hamara." And this Allama Iqbal asked for Muslim majoritarian country by the beginning of 1930, the beginning of the third decade of the past year. In between those 2-3 round tables, especially in between second and third round tables, a British graduate, were disbursing pamphlets. Why? For the creation of a state, nation, based on community, based on identity. identity politics, isn't it? What is your identity? Based on religion, Hindu, Muslim, based on caste, you name it, you have it. Based on your background, every person has an identity. It is not new in the independent country of India, that in the 1970s or 80s or 90s you saw, especially in Bihar or anywhere in the backward region of the country. The two-nation theory was propounded firstly by him. It was visioned by him. That was charmingly carried away by Muhammad Ali Jinnah later on. This fellow, Rahmat Ali, found no recognition in his own country. Why? Because of his identity. The majority of Pakistanis are Sunnis and he was Shia. Karma, you know. So this man, Rahmat Ali, conceptualized a region and what he named as Pakistan for the very first time in 1932. Pakistan as an abbreviation. P for Punjab, A for Afghanistan province, means of that time Northwestern Frontier Agency. So A for Afghan province, K for Kashmir, S for Sindh, and Tan from Balochistan. So there was no Bengal initially. There was no Hyderabad. There was no region from Gujarat. No Bhopal, which you came to know that. He was very specific towards a geographical region to get independent or bifurcated from the existing country India to form a separate country, which he named and visioned as Pakistan. And as already mentioned, he propounded two-nation theory. We also see separation of Burma. Burma actually became the part of British India administration in 1924 after the Burmese War, and for good more than 110 years it remained with this government. But fundamentally it was never the part of this subcontinent. As you saw Curzon, who visioned to split it, Bengal, 1905, in 1905, to break the momentum of the Bengalis against their rule, he bifurcated Bengal, and on the basis of that, again, Burma was carved out of Bihar, Indian subcontinent in 1936. National movement was there, and in order to weaken it, it was carved out or separated from India. Again, you see that if you talk about the provinces, Odisha, eastern state from India, it was along with Bihar and current Jharkhand. It was also separated. Odisha was bifurcated from Bihar. For the last 3 good decades, there was demand on the basis of identity, culture, to get a separate state. Now Bihar is distinctly different from Odisha. There is no doubt about this. But what also created no doubt among the tribals leader of in between these two regions was that if Bihar, a Gangetic plain region, is different from the Mahanadi dominated region, then why not Chota Nagpur? Why not Singhbhum? We are also not same. neither same to Bihar, neither same to Odisha. Now come on, we are indigenous. Distinctive culture, geographical isolation, shyness of contact. Are these the features of scheduled tribe? Na? You know it from local community recommendation from 1965. They have distinct culture. They are geographically isolated. They are primitive. They are backward. There is shyness of contact. They are tribes. They are indigenous people. Moolvasi. They are tribes. Adivasi. Janjatiya, scheduled tribe. So there was a sense that if leaders like Utkal Gaurav Madhusudan, K.C. Gajapati and Pandit Nilkant Das can agitate and organize themselves for the creation of separate statehood from existing Bihar, why can't be, right? It also took place on the platform of national level with the regional variability. And the final, we can see this Lahore resolution by All India Muslim League on 23rd of March 1940 in Lahore. It was visioned by Bengal's PM Fazlul Haq and it was prepared by Muhammad Zafarullah Khan. Now, do you know the reality of or the current reality of this Lahore resolution? This is a topic in the history of Pakistan. You don't read about history of Pakistan. You talk about Pakistan, the formation of Pakistan, or there's a content like Pakistan. And they say that 24th of March, Pakistan Divas, Pakistan Day was observed. They have also forget this date. That is 23rd of March 1940. Lahore resolution by Muslim League was actually observed. So these were the important narrative building phase. Why is this important? Because during initial time, means during this decade or after this, means before the independence, the very nature of Chota Nagpur or Jharkhand formation state was very separatist in nature. The leaders from Muslim League actually provoked the tribal leaders who actually hailed from Bengal region of East Pakistan. So it was very a separatist kind of movement. It created a kind of psychology, separatist psychology, so and so that in 1946, just before a year of the independence, Adivasi Mahasabha observed was as Pakistan conference by Adivasi Mahasabha with the help of Muslim League in Jharkhand, today's Jharkhand or Chota Nagpur region. It gets so much of distinction. So which also means that this Adivasi Sabha actually started to help or got into the favor of the British Empire, not Indian National Congress during this period. Why? Just because of the ideological reason. Fine. So now let us see that responses from South Bihar during this frame of time. So in 1927, boycott of Simon Commission was there, as already I mentioned. In Ranchi under S.K. Sahai and in Palamu under Kohoda Pandey, protests were led. Also, Bishop John Luke and Jewel Lakar of Chota Nagpur Unnati Samaj put forward the demand of separate tribal administrative unit again, Simon Commission that actually I had mentioned earlier. Fine. If we come in the third decade of the past century, then Kisan Sabha by Tibble Orao and Paul Dayal. It was a kind of radical movement in nature. It was formed. 2 years later, in 1933, Chota Nagpur Catholic Sabha by Boniface Lakda and Ignis Beg was formed. Then again, after 2 years, formation of Manbhum Bhumij Kshatriya Samiti had happened. Again, after 2 years, electoral setback for the tribal leaders of Chota Nagpur in the form of non-representation in Bihar province that actually I mentioned. There was no tribal or non-tribal leaders in the Bihar Assembly legislatives from South Bihar. In Bihar, there was no tribal representation from South Bihar. It was a kind of setback. Kripa Sindhu started a religious reform movement among Ho tribes in 1937, again in the same year. And finally, in 1938, Chota Nagpur Adivasi Sabha by Theodore Surin was established. And in the same year, 1938, formation of Chota Nagpur Santhal Pargana Adivasi Mahasabha on 31st March by Ignis Beg. It was merged by, formed by merging 5 organizations. They were Chota Nagpur Unnati Samaj, remember it from 1915, Kisan Sabha from 1930, Chota Nagpur Catholic Sabha, Munda Sabha and Ho Malto Sabha. In 1939, what happened that Jaipal Singh, who is also holds the title of Munda, Jaipal Singh Munda, was working as a revenue minister for the king of Bikaner in Rajasthan, and he was visiting Patna, and he was staying for few days in Ranchi, and he was asked to hold the chairpersonship of this Sabha in 1939. That was actually renamed as Adivasi Mahasabha, and Jaipal Singh Munda was made the first president of this organization. This is how he became became relevant in the national politics and in Jharkhand politics again. In 1939, formation of Sanatan Adivasi Sabha by Tibble Orao and other non-Christian tribals leader in the month of June had happened. And finally, the conclusion of the decade comes from in Adivasi Mahasabha third conference, where it was decided to support Britishers in the freedom struggle movement because of the ideological difference. So with this, I am here concluding my class on the importance and relevance in the political, constitutional, historical, social, narrative development in the country in the third decade of the past century, that is the 20th century, on the national front and on the regional front, that actually led to the formation of Jharkhand state and added to the momentum to the Jharkhand state formation movement to the next decade. We will see later on what had happened to the Jharkhand formation movement. We will also see that on the national front, historical front, what happened with the arrival of Cripps mission, cabinet mission, August offer, everything's, and the demand for Pakistan, how does it get intensified? The call for direct action day by Jinnah. See you soon. I'm signing off.